Hi guys, it's Jess from Honest Fiction and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be sharing my July wrap-up discussing all the books I read in July. Alright guys, so let's talk about July. I had a lot of ups and downs in terms of reading. I read some 1-star books, I read some 5-star books. It was a wild ride. I mean, I thought this was probably going to be my worst reading month overall this year. Like, I read a lot of duds, but then towards the end of the year, I read some absolutely amazing reads. So this is a mix of fantasy, romance. There's a decent amount of fantasy romance, YA fantasy, and then a lot of like dark, forbidden, and contemporary romance. And if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Thursday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit the notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram and Goodreads, both linked down below, and I finally fixed the Goodreads link. Thank you guys so much for telling me that it wasn't working. And yeah, with all out of the way, let's talk about the books I read in July. Alright guys, and I also forgot to mention, if my voice is sounding a little raspy, I have been sick like on and off the last week, so I apologize for that. So starting off with YA fantasy, the first book I read was These Twisted Bonds, and this is the second book in the These Hollow Vows duology. I love this. This might be my new favorite YA duology. It has a little bit of everything. So I actually buddy read this with Isa from Fantasy Books, and I would definitely recommend checking out her video. It's a recap video of These Hollow Vows. I will leave it linked down below just because this book picks up exactly where These Hollow Vows ended. And I can't say very much about this because I don't want to spoil anything, but These Hollow Vows, the first book, is following Bree, and she is this girl that's very good at being a thief. And she lives in these lands that people can make deals with the Fae, but in doing so, they can like lose pieces of themselves, and it's very dangerous to actually do this. And Bree just wants nothing to do with the Fae. We kind of find out more about that as we progress through the book. Unfortunately, Bree's younger sister is kidnapped by the king of the Unseelie court. So Bree has to go into the Fae lands, try to find her sister, and when she gets there, she meets the prince of the Seelie court, and then a band of misfits from the Unseelie court. And it's very similar to like ACOTAR and FBAA, but it does have its own like unique style. I have a full book review on this book that I will leave linked in the cards and in the description, but it is so fun, so good. This book was like so emotional, and I just loved how it ended. Like, I think this was a great conclusion to a duology. I will say, this could have been 3 books. I feel like a lot happens, especially the second half of this book. It is just like exciting event after exciting event, which sounds very good, but I feel like some things could have been fleshed out a little bit more, could have been elaborated upon. But overall, highly recommend. If you like These Hollow Vows, definitely check out this next book. And yeah, it was just an awesome time. All right, moving into fantasy romance. Fantasy romance was the highlight of my July. So I found a new favorite series, and I'm just completely obsessed and addicted to it. So if you guys are familiar with my channel, when I first discovered Zodiac Academy, I just couldn't stop talking about that series and recommending it to everyone. This is gonna be like that. So the Bonsa tie, and this is by Bree. So this first book is Broken Bonds, and this is following Oleander. So in the very beginning of the story, Oleander is talking about her mother's bonds. So she's driving in a car with her family, and we find out that bonds are kind of like bonded mates. So her mother has like 3 husbands essentially, and there are a very close family unit. So that's kind of how bonds like work in this world. So unfortunately, her entire family is killed. This isn't a spoiler. It happens in like the first 2 pages. And she ends up being on the run for 5 years. And we find out that Oleander is actually running away from her bonded, which is not something that happens very often in this world. So after 5 years on the run, she is dragged back, and she has to now go live with the bonded she ran away from. And they are not happy with her, which is where the whole like bully aspect of this book comes in. I think I forgot to mention this is a reverse harem paranormal bully romance, and it's fantastic. So once she is brought back in front of her bonds, they're all very angry with her, and she kind of has to figure out what she's going to do. She still wants to run away from them, but she also has this very strong connection to all of them. So why I love this so much is I am typically on the fence with reverse harem. I feel like in a lot of reverse harem books, they don't give enough info and background to all of the different love interests, and they just feel kind of one-dimensional. They normally just like fall into a certain trope. Yes, that kind of happens with this, but I love every single one of her bonds. I just love that we get to go into their heads. This is multi-POV. And it's just so good. So I listened to this via audio. I've only listened to the first 3 books because the other 2 aren't out yet. I know that Victoria from Victoria's Romance Reads is also loving this series and also kind of prefers the audio version. The narrator just does a fantastic job. So highly recommend checking this out via audio. But the 6th book is coming out, I think, right after my birthday on September 28th. And yeah, I just absolutely love this series, and thank you all so much. A lot of you guys have been recommending me this series, but I was really hesitant to pick it up because I like audio and it was just released in audio. But yeah, definitely, if you like Zodiac Academy, you will love this series. And next up, I read a fantasy romance duology that is divine. I wish I had read this series sooner. One of my friends had been recommending me this book for like months, and I think I bought the physical copy all the way back in December, and I wish I read it then because it was just so good. So it is a King So Cold by Elle Fields. So it's 2 books, A King So Cold and then The Stray Prince. I actually prefer the 2nd book, but this book is also, I think both of them I rated 5 stars. So this is following Audra, and at the very beginning of the story, we find out that she is this young queen who has recently come into the throne after after her father has died suddenly. And her lands are on the brink of war. There are these people coming to invade. And we also find out very early that she is just a very cold character. She is very mean to people, even her friends. And this book is kind of discovering why she is that way. So we also discover in the very beginning of the story that she has cast her husband out of her city or her lands, and he has no memory of her. However, she gets very upset when she finds out that he is about to marry someone else. So she brings him back and just kind of starts torturing him, and we're trying to discover why she took his memories away in the first place. And it's such a good story of understanding how a character became the way. This is kind of like a villain origin story, but not really, because she's not really a villain. This reminded me a lot of the Guild series, not really in terms of like magic and world building, but in terms of seeing this like very flawed character and how they became that way. I think this book does it a lot better. Like, I completely understood why she was doing everything. I understood her motivations, and it was just great. There is a love triangle in this. That's all I'm gonna say, but this was it was so, so good. Now, the Stray Prince kind of amps up when it comes to like magic, and we find out a lot more about the history. This just feels a little bit more fantastical. This one also is a little bit darker. Just know that going in, because I was not prepared for it. But this is so good. So highly recommend if you're a fan of fantasy, adult fantasy, you want a little bit of steam, but you also want some like politics, pick this series up, this duology up. It's amazing. All right, so moving into romance, I'm gonna start off with like dark, taboo, forbidden romance, and then mafia, motorcycle club romance, and then end with like cutesy rom-com romance. So let's get this first one out of the way. I read 3.5 of the Crossfire series books. This is the first one, Bardew, and this is by Sylvia Day. So Cheyenne from That's All Book Girl was super awesome, and she got a bunch of us booktubers together to read or reread the Crossfire series and like vlog our journey. So I will leave my vlog linked in the cards and in the description, but I didn't like it. I was not a fan of the writing and the steam, and it did not work for me. I understand that this is a comfort read for a lot of people, so don't take what I say too seriously. If you want to check this out, definitely go for it. It didn't work for me. It's a millionaire romance, very similar to like 50 Shades of Grey, except a little bit more toxic, if that's possible. But yeah, so if you want to, definitely check this out. Definitely check out everyone's reading vlogs. They were so much fun to watch. We just all had such different opinions about this series. But anyway, definitely check those out. I'll leave them linked down below. All right, so I actually read a couple of age gaps this month. So first up, we have Devious Lies, and this is by Parker S. Huntington. So this is the same author that wrote Darling Venom, and I actually preferred this book a little bit more. So this is following our main character, that when she's growing up, she has a huge crush on her best friend. Her best friend happens to be the house cleaner's son, and she's from a very, very wealthy family. So they're really not supposed to date, but she still has like a huge crush on him. And then one day, her best friend breaks up with his girlfriend, and she decides she is gonna sleep with him. So she sneaks into his bedroom at night, and they have sex, and then when the lights come on, she finds out she did not sleep with her best friend. She actually slept with his much older brother. So then we do a time jump, and our main character is now kind of living in poverty. She is estranged from her very wealthy family, and we don't exactly know why. And she's still in contact with her best friend, but the best friend's brother that she slept with in the beginning of the story absolutely hates her. And on top of that, she ends up getting a job at his hotel. He doesn't realize this at first. She's kind of like an intern, but when he finds out, he decides he's going to make her life a living hell. And it goes from there. And it was good. I just really enjoyed this. I will say the writing this a little bit pretentious, but besides that, it was just a fun story. And it's quite chunky, but I flew through this. I think I read this in like 2 days. And like I said, age gap romance. And we kind of get to see, there is a little bit of miscommunication, but I love books where the guy ends up kind of taking care of the girl. And that happens in this, and I just love it. And yeah, it was really fun. So if you want an age gap romance, I don't hear a lot of people talking about this one. Definitely check it out. And next up, I read Eyes on Me, which is the second book in the Salacious Players Club. The first book is Praise by Sara, Cate. I loved Praise. Eyes on Me, it was okay. It wasn't, definitely not going to be my favorite in the series. So it is following Garrett, and he is a voyeur. So he likes to watch people do it. And one day he is on his computer and he's checking out this like really hot cam girl. Turns out it is his stepsister, and much younger stepsister. I believe there's a significant age gap to them as well. And he's very intrigued. So then they end up like pursuing a relationship, and it was fine. It's just, I liked the mental health representation. I just really didn't feel connected to these characters. I didn't love the romance. The voyeur aspect was like kind of cool. I've never read a book that had that before. But yeah, they didn't really work for me as a couple. I just wanted a little bit more of an emotional connection. But overall, it was fun. I think if you enjoyed Praise, you will probably enjoy this. I cannot wait to read Give Me More. The audiobook needs to come out. I've been waiting for the audiobook to come out for months, or at least since the book released. So hopefully that drops in August. But yeah, definitely check it out. It's very unique. Just personally, I didn't love it. All right, so this next book I actually picked up because Tori from Novellife was raving about it. I think it was her favorite read of June, and that is Ivy by Willa Nash. So I also didn't realize that Willa Nash is Devney Perry's pen name, so I ended up reading a lot of Devney Perry this month without realizing it. But this was super interesting. So the back of this book kind of led me to believe that it was like a thriller. It's not really. It's more, I've seen people compare it to Gossip Girl. I think that is so true. It is very reminiscent of Gossip Girl. And it's following these 3 relationships. So all of the people in this story are super wealthy except for one girl, and they're all going to this Ivy League college. And they're all kind of manipulative, and they all are trying to do things. Like, they're all very self-motivated people, but it's very interesting just following their different relationships. So I ended up really enjoying this. However, it took me a while to get invested in this story. I almost DNF'd this at the halfway point just because I didn't know where the story was going. But then I felt for these characters. Like, they do some dumb things and they keep secrets, but also I understood why. So I really ended up enjoying this by the end. There were some twists that I did not see coming at the very end of the story, and it was just a good time. So I would definitely check this out. Like I said, it is pretty chunky. Sorry, there's water damage because Amazon hates me. But overall, I would definitely pick this up if you're looking for a very unique romance. This will probably be for you. All right, and continuing with books I picked up because of other booktubers, I picked up A Love Letter to Whiskey by Kandi Steiner. I know Jess from PeaceLoveBooks absolutely loves this book. She's talked about it a lot on her channel, and I wanted to give it a try. So, this is going to be controversial. I didn't love it. I liked it. I thought it was a good time. I was just so frustrated with the characters for the most of this book. Like, I don't like when books just make me angry most of the time I'm reading it. So this heavily relies on the right person, wrong time trope. And I've learned that is not a good trope for me to read. It just infuriates me. But the story was really good. It's following this girl, and she has had a crush on this guy, and the circumstances just never were right for her. At one point, he's dating her best friend, and then something else happens, but they've always been very close, and they've always had a great connection, and they've stayed in touch throughout their lives, but certain things always prevented them from being together. And like I said, I was enjoying the story. I really like how the story is done. She refers to the love interest as whiskey, so she's always like, oh, I can't get whiskey out of my head. I just need another shot of whiskey, and I loved that part of the book. I just thought it was very unique. However, once again, I was just so frustrated with these characters. I was like, just get together already. Come on. Like, you obviously love each other. Why are you doing this? So overall, I think I ended up rating it 4 stars or like 3.75 stars. I might bump it up to 4 stars. But it was definitely emotional. So if you want an emotional standalone romance, highly recommend. And next up for Forbidden Taboo, I read Hush Hush and then the companion novel Say Yes by Lucia Franco. And this was very taboo. It's age gap, and it's following this girl that's in college and she's trying to make some extra money, and she finds out that her roommate is actually a high-end escort. So her roommate gets her to join the same company, and it is her experience as a high-end escort, and it is a time. And then while escorting, she ends up meeting this older guy that she just instantly has a huge crush on. But you're not really supposed to date people that are your clients. But then some drama happens and we find out a little bit more about this guy, and it's very toxic, it's very taboo, and honestly the main character, I would have been okay if she just lost everything in the end because of everyone she was lying to. Like, she wasn't the best person. However, this book was really fun. So if you want a taboo, age gap, very spicy romance by Lucia Franco, definitely pick it up. The companion novel, you don't need to read it. If you want more of the happy ever after, you really don't get it in this first book. So the second book is really just kind of that. You get to see the two people be together, but it was wild, but it was really fun. All right, so moving into mafia romance, this next book I loved, and that is Dangerous Temptation by Giana Darling. I will say, this does not feel like any other Giana Darling book I've written. The writing style feels very different. This is very dark. I know a lot of her other books are dark, but this just felt like so removed from her other works. But I still loved it. It just took me a little while to get into it. But this is following Bianca, and she is really the main caretaker of her household. I think she's only 17 when the book starts, and she's taking care of her little brother who has epilepsy. And her mother is just like super flighty. She had her when she was really young and just doesn't really take care of her kids. So Bianca kind of has stepped up. So her mother ends up dating this very attractive and broody and angry guy who is unbelievably wealthy, and he's just so mean to Bianca, like right off the bat. And then, unfortunately, her mother ends up passing away. This also happens very, very early on in the book, not a spoiler. So then the boyfriend ends up taking custody of Bianca and her brother. So this is age gap. Significant age gap. It's also mom's ex-boyfriend romance. First time reading that. That was interesting. And also, the main character is the guardian of his love interest. So, like, there's a lot of taboo stuff going on here. Also, I mentioned this is mafia, so it turns out that the mother's boyfriend is actually in the mafia, and that Bianca also has some mafia ties. So, I ate this up. I love this. I listened to this book in a day. It finally dropped in audio. I'm waiting to read the second book. I started it in the ebook, and I just think I'll appreciate it more if I wait for the audio version to drop. But I really enjoyed this. Just know going in, significant age gap. Main character is under 18. She's 17. Very mature for her age, but I know that's still very triggering for some people. So just like check trigger warnings before jumping in, but I really enjoyed this. All right, so continuing with Mafia, I actually read 2 books from the Kingmaker series by Sophie Lark. So I'm actually enjoying Kingmakers more than Brutal Birthright, which I never thought was going to be possible. So don't get me wrong, I love the Brutal Birthright series. It is one of my favorite Mafia series. But the Kingmakers is just fun. So if you don't know what Kingmakers is about, it is following the children from the couples in the Brutal Birthright series. And they are all children of like mob bosses and people from the mafia. And they're sent off to this mafia college known as Kingmakers, where they learn how to be like spies and leaders and how to embezzle money and make like, not drugs, and make poisons and stuff like that. And it's so fun. So I read The Spy, which is following Zoe and Miles. So Zoe is trapped in this horrible arranged marriage to this sociopath, and he's a terrible person. He is the worst. And she ends up falling in love while at Kingmakers with this guy named Miles, who seems like kind of like a party guy, but really has a little bit more depth. And it was fun. It's not my favorite in the series, but I still really enjoyed it. And then I read The Bully. Oh, God tier. Like, definitely gonna be my favorite in the series. It was just, I had been waiting for this book, and Sophie Lark finally like released it on her Patreon. Thank you, the Love Librarian, for telling me about it, because that made my day. It was just, it's so good. So it's Dean and Cate, and Dean is in the first book in the Kingmaker series, and he's just a bully. He is from the Russian mafia, and he hates everyone, and he is just, everyone is against me. And then you have Cate, who is just like the nicest girl that did not want to go to this Kingmaker college. She thought she was going to go to art school, and something happens at the end of The Spy that makes Cate indebted to Dean. So then in the very beginning of this story, Dean is kind of making Cate's life hell until he realizes, oh wait, Cate's kind of hot. So she agrees to be his like servant for a month, and then he will not use what he has against her. So they end up having this like relationship. It's kind of like a praise type thing. And it was so good. And I love Dean's story. I loved his growth in this. And it's highly, highly recommend. Definitely read The Bully. Probably one of my favorite reads of July. But yeah, it was just so, so good. And then next up, I read 2 books from the Clifton Forge series, which is a motorcycle club series by Devney Perry. So the first book is Steel King, and this is enemies to lovers. We're following this reporter who goes into this small town and is trying to get dirt on the motorcycle club. And it just so happens that when she gets to the town, a murder takes place and they blame it on the president of the motorcycle club. So while she's investigating, she ends up kind of falling for one of the head guys in this club. And it was fun. It's not a standout book for me. I did enjoy it. I like the second book a lot more. So the second book is Ribbon Night, and this is fake marriage. So 2 characters from the first book end up doing this fake marriage in order to not be, I can't even tell you because I think it's a spoiler for the first book, but they end up doing a fake marriage, and then obviously they slowly fall in love. But it is the slowest of slow burns. It's not that long a book, but I don't think they like really kiss like for real, like in passion kiss until 70% into the book. So just know that going in, it is very slow, but it was super enjoyable. So Jess from PeaceLoveBooks and Live a Novellife, or Tori from Live a Novellife, are both hosting a read-along, so definitely check that out. I think the next one is I'll leave the date on the screen somewhere. But anyway, very much enjoyed it. It was really fun. And next up, I read 2 rom-coms. So first up, we have Good Girl Complex by Elle Kennedy. And I actually enjoyed this. I think this has like a 3.5 on Goodreads. I thought it was fun for what it is. I mean, as a lighthearted beach read rom-com, I think this was enjoyable. So this is following a girl who she's going to college for the first time. Her parents are very wealthy and they're kind of forcing her to go. She's already established like doing something on the side that is making her a ton of money, but she's doing it just kind of for her parents. She's also dating this kind of douchey guy that her parents want her to marry. They've been dating since high school, and her life is pretty much mapped out by her family. So anyway, she gets to college. One day at a bar, she meets this guy and they kind of hit it off. Now this guy is flirting with her for his own reasons that we find out very early on in the book. So he's kind of tricking her. So I would check trigger warnings. There are some things in this that are kind of shady, but she ends up really liking this guy and likes hanging out with him and kind of starts to lose her good girl complex. I will say, a lot happens in this book. I felt like there was like 2 different plots that you could have done like a single book with one, a single book with the other. So the first one is her leaving her boyfriend and like kind of getting away from her parents. But then the other one is she's dating this guy that is actually dating her for a bet and then trying to like kind of win over his friends. It just felt like there was a lot happening, but it was still really fun. I read this in a day. Like I was cleaning and I ended up listening to the entire book. So if you want a fun book by Elle Kennedy, I mean, Elle Kennedy also wrote The Deal. She's a great writer. I would check this out. I really enjoyed it. And then last up, I read My Killer Vacation by Tessa Bailey. So this is following our main character who is a teacher, and then she also loves true crime podcasts. So I just really related to the main character. She is very bubbly, very happy, and when she goes to her Airbnb, she discovers a dead body. So the bounty hunter that comes to try to solve the crime, they end up forming a relationship. It's kind of hate to love, but then it turns into like instant lust like super fast. There's very little hate going on. But he's just this big guy that's covered in tattoos, and she is this tiny bubbly teacher, and they work together to like solve the crime. Very, very steamy, like right off the bat, but it was also just fun. I mean, I think it's one of the perfect like summer reads, super quick, and I really enjoyed it. All right, guys, those are all the books I read in July. Please let me know down in the comments below if you have read any of the books I mentioned. I said this already, I post new videos every Thursday and Sunday, and if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye!